that right? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and councillors, and welcome to this first meeting of the Buckinghamshire Council's South Buckinghamshire Area Planning Committee for this municipal year. I am Councillor Trevor Eagleton, Chairman of the committee. With social distancing measures still in place, this is our first face-to-face meeting since the start of the pandemic. Please note that the meeting will be webcast and the press and public can see and hear the meeting through the webcast if they so wish. In the unlikely event that there is a technical issue with the webcast, the meeting will be paused to see if the issue can be resolved. Agenda papers have been published in accordance with the usual practice. Please note some housekeeping points. Can you turn off your mobile phones or keep them on silent during the meeting? Laptops and tablets should only be used to access the agenda and reports back for today's meeting. You should refrain from using them for general internet access. Please raise your hand at the appropriate time if you wish to speak. I will make a note that hands are raised and take in the order that I see them. Also, please remember to turn your microphones on before you speak and off once you've finished. In the unlikely event of a fire alarm, please use the nearest fire exit and assemble near to the Amersham Police Station across the car park. That's the formal introduction, and may I say what a pleasure it is to have a meeting where we're actually present instead of staring at a laptop screen. It's nice to see you all here, and we will at the next meeting hopefully have yet a different arrangement where we won't have to have the 2 metre social distancing. So I will then leave this elevated position hopefully and be on a level with you. Right, if we could turn to the agenda. The first item is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. We've got no apologies.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of the Vice Chairman. And just for clarification, this is an appointment, not an election. And I propose to appoint Councillor Guy Hollis to be Vice Chairman of the South Buckinghamshire Area Planning Committee for the next municipal year. I take it everyone's in agreement with that? Agreed? So it looks like you're Vice Chairman for the year. Okay. And we will be sitting closer in the next year, so you'll better write notes to me of who's put their hand up to speak and all those important things. But looking forward to working with you, Guy, and I'm really looking forward to working with this planning committee. I know we have some very new members to the committee and particularly to the council, so it's a real pleasure to see you here. Right, declarations of interest. Now, I have one to make, that there was a presentation to the Ivers and Wexham Community Board, not on the planning application, but on the day centre proposal. So I am declaring a personal interest under the Council's Code of Conduct, as I am a member of the Wexham and Ivers Community Board, who have received a presentation from Denham Parish Council on application PL 204026FA, former Tile House Day Opportunity Centre. There was no discussion on the item, and I have not expressed a view on the application and have not predetermined the application. I have an open mind and will listen and look forward to the debate and come to a decision at the end. Thank you. Any other declarations? No. Councillor Hollis?
Chairman, I'm declaring a personal interest under the Council Code of Conduct as I'm a member of the current Denham Parish Council who've made representations about this application. I've not expressed a view on the application. It's been discussed at meetings of the Town Parish Council. I've not predetermined the application. I have an open mind and will listen to the debate and come to a decision. And I am also declaring a personal interest under the Council Code of Conduct as I'm a member of the Denham, Gerrards Cross and Chalfont Community Board who've received a presentation from Denham Parish Council on application PL 204026/FA, the former Tarhouse Day Opportunity Centre. There's no discussion on the item and I have not presented a view on the application and have not predetermined the application. I have an open mind and will listen to the debate and come to a decision.
Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm also declaring a personal interest under the Council's Code of Conduct as I'm a member of the Wexham and Ivers Community Board who received a presentation from Denham Parish Council on an application PL/20/4026/FA, former Tarhouse Day Opportunity Centre. There was no discussion on the item and I've not expressed a view on the application and have not predetermined the application. I have an open mind and will listen to the debate and come to a decision. The Community Board did not hear a presentation about the application, but the Parish Council's intention to try and set up a daycare centre in Denham. Thank you.
Councillor Sandy, if I can go round in order. Councillor Sandy.
Thank you. I'm declaring a personal interest insofar that I'm the person asked for one of the items today to be heard by the Council. I've not, do I have to read all of this now?
Microphone.
Sorry. Did anyone hear any of that?
You only have to declare.
I'll start again. I'm declaring an interest insofar that it is me that asked for the application on 50A Hog Fair to come to the Planning Committee, insofar that I'm merely representing the concerns of the residents who are affected by that application is my involvement. I've not attended any parish or town council, Burnham in particular, to discuss this and have therefore to listen to the debate and add my contribution and no doubt questions, but that will be my involvement.
And you can confirm you haven't predetermined the application, Councillor?
Sorry?
You confirm that you haven't predetermined the application?
No. I mean, I have to take some persuasion, but I haven't predetermined.
Thank you for that. Councillor Chocker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a declaration to register. I'm declaring a personal interest in the Council's Code of Conduct, under the Council's Code of Conduct, as I am a member of the Denham, Gerrards Cross and Chalfont Community Board, who have received a presentation from Denham Parish Council on application PL/2026/FA, former Tarhouse Day Opportunity Centre. There is no discussion on the item and I have not expressed a view on the application and have not predetermined the application. I have an open mind and will listen to the debate and come to a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brum.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm declaring a personal interest under the Council's Code of Conduct as I'm a member of the Denham, Gerrards Cross and Chalfont Community Board who have received a presentation from Denham Parish Council on application PL/20/4026/FA, the former Tarhouse Day Opportunity Centre. There was no discussion on the item and I have not expressed a view on the application and I have not predetermined the application. I have an open mind and will listen to the debate and come to a decision. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Bracken.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm also declaring a personal interest in the Council's Code of Conduct as I'm a member of the Denham, Gerrards Cross and Chalfont Community Board, who has received a presentation from Denham Parish Council on application PL 204026/FA, former Tarhouse Day Opportunity Centre. There was no discussion on the item and I have not expressed a view on the application and have not predetermined the application. I have an open mind and will listen to the debate and come to a decision.
Do we have any other declarations? Yes. Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chairman. I am also declaring a personal interest under the Council's Code of Conduct, as I'm a member of the Wexham and Ivors Community Board, who has received a presentation from Denham Parish Council on application PL/20/42026/FA, former Tile House Day Opportunity Centre. There was no discussion on the item, and I have not expressed a view on the application and have not predetermined the application. I have an open mind and will listen to the debate and come to a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? Do we have anything from Councillor Anthony? Have you got any declaration on this item? No? Right, thank you. That's all the declarations of interest. Thank you for that. Right, agenda item 4 is the minutes of the last 2 meetings. Do we agree to approve the minutes of the meetings held on the 16th of March 2021 and the 26th of May 2021 as a correct record? Agreed? Thank you. Right. We will now consider the first... Before we move on to the actual agenda item 5, just to run you through the procedure. Firstly, the planning officer will introduce the application with any relevant updates. Members will then hear any public speaking statements in the following order: Councillor / local member, Parish Town Council representative, objectors, supporters, the agent or applicant. After the public speaking statements have been heard, members are able to ask the speakers for clarification on matters raised in their statement, and these must be addressed through myself as the chairman. I will then ask members if they have any technical questions of officers. Following this, the entire committee will then discuss the application. Members may seek further clarification from officers on points regarding the application, points raised by speakers in the main debate. Officers will respond to the issues and questions raised by the members during that session. I would say that as chairman, I need to ensure that everyone has had their contribution that they require to the meeting. So we will not move to any recommendations or proposals until I decide that everyone has spoken, and we can then move on. Because otherwise, if we do have a proposal or a recommendation, that has to be taken halfway through the debate, which is not a good way to run it. And I will indicate when I think we're at the end of the debate, if there will maybe some points that I need to raise that haven't been raised during the debate. So I will sum up at the end of the debate and then we'll move to recommendations. Right, we now move to item 5 at page 7 on the agenda pack. The application reference is PL/20/4026/FA. Redevelopment of site to provide 7 dwellings comprising 4 open market dwellings and 3 affordable dwellings with access, landscaping and associated works at the former Tile House Day Opportunity Centre, Nightingale Way, Denham Green, Buckinghamshire, UB9 5JL. I will now call on the case officer, Richard Regan, to introduce the application. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. As stated, this proposal is for the redevelopment of the site to provide 7 dwellings comprising 4 open market dwellings and 3 affordable dwellings, together with access, landscaping and associated works. So the application site itself can be identified on the plan as outlined in red. It's located in the developed area of Denham on the north west side of Nightingale Way. You'll see at the moment the site is fairly undeveloped at the front, has an open frontage with the building set back within the site, with the main building within the middle of the site and a further property, a residential dwelling to the rear. In context, in terms of providing a satellite view, you'll see the flatted development in Ranston Close, immediately adjacent to the property application sites here, with terraced dwellings here. The rest of the street scene made up of predominantly detached dwellings. For your benefit, some photographs of the site. So these two photographs show the frontage of the site, looking towards it. The front photograph is angled towards the property on the left-hand side, which is a single-storey bungalow, and then you have Ranston Close flats on the right-hand side. You'll note sort of the lack of built form at present at the frontage of the site, and you'll notice the ground levels that do rise from the front to the rear of the site. Also to be noted is the woodland to the rear of the site. These photographs just show a closer view of those immediately adjacent properties to either side. The top photograph here is the residential, the caretaker, what was the caretaker's residential property towards the rear of the site, and the photograph below is the main building that currently exists. These photographs just provide further evidence of the adjacent flats at Ranston Close, how they relate to the application site. The proposal itself, in terms of the proposed layout, it seeks to introduce residential development, and at the front of the site, which is currently open, a row of 3 terraced properties, 2-storey in nature. They're located at the front of the site to replicate the existing sort of built form, with dwellings fronting onto the highway. Then there's a pair of semi-detached properties that will be located towards the middle of the site in the approximate location of the existing main building, and then there's a further pair of semis towards the rear, showing a similar location as the existing residential dwelling on site. There will be a parking area, as you can see, in the middle of the site, that provide parking for the blocks 1 to 3 and 4 to 5, whereas blocks 6 and 7 have their own parking adjacent to their properties. Elevation drawings of the proposed plots 1 to 3 that will be sited at the front of the site. In terms of the design appearance, through the course of the application we've had discussions, negotiations with the applicant, and there's been significant changes to their design appearance, predominantly with their roof design. Originally they had incorporated large gable features, but in line with the sort of the general prevailing character of the area in terms of roof design, with parallel ridge lines parallel to the highway. The roof design has been altered to create sloping roofs that slope away from the highway. This has enabled the scale and bulk and height of the dwellings to be reduced, as well as the reduction in the heights of the eaves. Just quickly looking at the floor plans, the properties at the front, 3 bedrooms at first floor, living accommodation at ground floor. Plots 4 and 5 on the left-hand side, 6 and 7 on the right-hand side of the screen follow the same architectural approach and appearance of dwellings at the front, providing slight variations in their ultimate appearance. In terms of floor plans, plots 4 and 5 that are in the middle of the site, they are 4-bedroom properties. You can see on the floor plans, 4 bedrooms at first floor, and a pair of semis at the rear are 3 bedrooms. In terms of street scene, in terms of how it would integrate into the existing street scene, you'll see the row of terraces at the front, continuing the ridge heights of those properties existing building on Ranston Close. And as the land levels raise, obviously the heights of those dwellings will increase. Obviously they're set back from the front of the site, in keeping with the adjacent property to the right, and then Branston Close, maintaining the ridge height there with those properties there. Some visualisations to help indicate or demonstrate what the development would look like within the street scene. This is the Ranston Close development, residential property bungalow to the left. Then to the frontage, it's proposed to incorporate low-level gorse walls and natural vegetation to help maintain the existing street scene and characteristics of the road. This is a wider view of the development in the context of those surrounding existing properties. And for information purposes, so this slide shows the development that was approved at Ranston Close to the right-hand side of the site. And this is to just highlight and demonstrate that that scheme itself wasn't fully implemented and actually incorporated an additional flatted two-storey built form in this location here, which is the same location as the proposed terrace of 3 properties. It's just to highlight the relationship that would have been created with those properties that have been built that here that front onto the application site in terms of those relationship there. So that's, if fully implemented, which in essence it still could, that could be built out on the application site, and that would be the resultant relationship that was previously considered acceptable and approved planning permission. So the site is located in the developed area of Denham, where the principle of providing additional dwellings is considered acceptable. Proposed development is considered to be of an appropriate design, layout and appearance, which would not adversely impact on the character and appearance of the site or locality in general. Development would provide a 40% contribution towards affordable housing, with 3 of the 7 units being affordable. It is considered that this is a positive benefit of the scheme, as a proposal of this size does not need to make any such provision under local or national affordable housing policies. Therefore, it does exceed the number of affordable units that would normally be required for a development of this size. In addition to this, the tenure of the affordable units goes beyond the requirements of the Council's own affordable housing policy, then that all 3 units will be social rented, as this best meets the Council's needs, current needs and demands. The proposal would result in the loss of an existing community facility. However, its loss is considered justified by virtue of the relevant development plan policies being complied with. It is acknowledged that Denham Parish Council have objected to this loss on the grounds that the site is identified as a local community use in the emerging Denham Neighbourhood Plan. The Denham Neighbourhood Plan does not currently form part of the development plan, but to acknowledge it is a material consideration. Given its status, in that it's still emerging, only limited weight can be given to it. Therefore, whilst the proposal may not meet the requirements of the relevant policy within the Denham Neighbourhood Plan, given that it would comply with the relevant development plan policies, which do carry full weight, it is not considered that there are grounds to refuse this proposal for reasons relating to the loss of community facility. Overall, it's your officer's view that the proposal is acceptable. That concludes my summary, and I await your further instructions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Egan. We can now move on to invite the first speaker, Councillor Julia Walsh of the Parish Council.
Thank you, Chair.
And you have 3 minutes to speak, and we do have a large timer there. So start when you're ready.
Denham Parish Council objects most strongly to the demolition of the Tile House Centre in favour of the development you have before you. The officer cites COM2D as the satisfying criteria for the loss of community facility by the replacement of 3 social housing units. The Unitary Council has failed to prove that the site is no longer required, and also failed to prove that it is too dilapidated to be refurbished. There was no consultation with the Parish Council, despite our repeated attempts to acquire the site over a number of years. Councillor Chilver has apologised for the way our requests have been handled and allowed us to present an alternative plan for the use of the site, which resides in a level 5 area of deprivation. DPC is not against building homes. Over 280 homes have been built recently, with 40% social housing in the large development of the Denham Film Laboratories. A detailed plan will be presented to councillors Macpherson and Chilver shortly, with an independent surveyor's report showing the site can be returned to use, and it is backed by a financially viable plan to serve the specialised needs of dementia and learning difficulties for adults. Turning to the report at paragraph 516, it indicates that there is sufficient capacity within existing day centres. We question the basis of this comment. Public Health England's report identifies the community board in which Denham resides as having the highest recorded prevalence of dementia. DPC has also independently verified the high number of these vulnerable residents living within a 5-mile radius of Denham, and a resident survey returned 99% in favour of a specialist centre in Denham. It also has the support of our GPs and our MP. The report in paragraph 6.9 cites the NPPF paragraph 11D as the benefits outweighing any adverse impacts. The tilted balance has not been applied to the alternative use of a community centre catering for specialised needs. DPC contends this would significantly and demonstrably be adversely impacted by the development and would outweigh any benefit of the additional housing. Yet in paragraph 611, the report mentions the development would not disadvantage any sector of society. The proposed development contravenes Den 9 of the Denham Neighbourhood Plan, which is now past inspection, and contravenes section 8 of the NPPF, paragraphs 91A and C, and 92A, C, D and E. In Buckinghamshire, day centres are few and far between, having been built to satisfy the policy at the time of larger, fewer centres. This policy now flies in the face of the current Joint Strategic Needs Assessment report, which identifies a gap in service provision and the need to make improvements to provide more local day opportunities. The officer's report cites that adult social care confirmed the site's surplus to requirements in 2015, when the policy of fewer centres was in vogue. This policy has never been revisited and is out of date. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Walsh. Now, members, we will take any points of clarification that has been made by Councillor Walsh now, because we can't keep on moving about people because of COVID. So instead of taking them at the end of the public presentations, we'll do each speaker. So, members, do you have any points of clarification? Yes, Councillor Hollis.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation, Dr. Walsh. So, in essence, what I hear you saying is that, first of all, the need to demolish a community centre has not been adequately proven by virtue of the fact that you've not been consulted, and no proper survey of the residents has been done, no reference has been done correctly to the Public Health England report, to the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, and the policy of centralisation is outdated. Is that and leaves centres inaccessible? Is that one of the points that you might? Those are some of the points that you might be raising. Yeah. Yeah. And then you're also going on to say that your case is that for it remaining as a community centre is proven by virtue of your own research and by what it says in the PHE report and the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. I'm aware of those documents because I was on the Adult Health and Social Care Select Committee. And you're also saying that you have a business case in which you would wish to reopen the centre. Is that all correct, what I'm asking you there? Yeah. I thought. Yeah. Sorry. Mine. You. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, those are the main points that you've outlined. We did inquire as to whether there was a formal surveyor's report on the site that Buckinghamshire Council might have undertaken, but that hasn't materialised, so we assume that there was no formal survey undertaken. As far as the centres are concerned, we contend also that there is a significant need for new day centres. Burnham at the moment is full. It's not able to operate in a COVID compliant way. The next centre is High Wycombe. And those mean that, for a confused relative, you're talking about a 25-mile journey, round trip to Burnham. You're talking about a 35-mile trip to High Wycombe and back. And that is extremely difficult for these type of residents. Our plan, in fact, incorporates a dedicated minibus so that the residents get used to seeing something familiar. They get used to the fact that their friends will be in that minibus. And it's a much better model, I would suggest, than Buckinghamshire Council operates at the moment with its centres.
Thank you. Just ask another question. Kill your mic. Thank you. And do you envisage there being savings for the Unitary Council if this business plan is implemented?
Thank you. The Alzheimer's Society have a figure of £37,000 for day life care, for life care of a resident in that kind of condition. So if you look at even 30 residents at our centre, which it is well capable of taking, you're talking about just over £1 million. So if you can keep those residents in their homes for their lives, rather than either putting them into hospital, or in the case of Buckinghamshire Council, more importantly, taking them off the budget of the adult health care, then to us it makes a great deal of sense. So we would see this as much more of a partnership working than, a confrontation in any way, shape or form.
Just one more.
One short one.
One short one. Okay. So this Dr. Walsh, this development's proposing to deliver 7 homes. Is it true to say that you mentioned 240 homes have been delivered in Denham? Would it be true to say there are another 79 on the way? And that in the Brownfield call for sites there are another 300 plus homes, and therefore that perhaps the 3 affordable units might just not be missed in favour of a community day centre for people with rising cases of dementia and all the costs we might save the unitary. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the 7 homes, just to put them into context, we're looking at a site in Tackling End, which in itself would supply 7 homes. We've also, as you mentioned, we've been very forthright in terms of identifying sites for the brownfield sites, and we've also have a number of offices which we see will be being converted to homes in the not too distant future. So the number is significant. I mean, it does run in hundreds.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other points of clarification from members? Councillor Broom.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I ask about the allegation that consultation with the Parish Council didn't take place? Can I confirm that there has been no opportunity for Denham Parish Council to actually feed into this process? Secondly, has Denham Parish Council been informed of any impact assessment of the withdrawal of potential service from this day centre?
Could I ask for a repeat of the question?
Can you repeat the questions, Councillor Blunt? Microphone on. It's not lit up, is it? Is it lit up?
Sorry. Yes, I should try and speak a little more clearly this time. My question, or my point of clarification, was to confirm that has Denham Parish Council not had any opportunity to feed into this process as a consultee? And secondly, has Denham Parish Council seen any impact assessment from Bucks Council of withdrawing a service or a potential service of this kind? Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor. We've not been allowed to feed into this planning application in any way, shape or form. We did make, obviously, Councillor Chilver and Macpherson aware of our plan. They indeed invited an alternative use of the site, and they confirmed that in January. So really, if you look at it, there's been plenty of time to have a feed into the situation. As far as the impact assessment is concerned, it's difficult because the site has been unoccupied for 5 years, despite our best efforts. But you know, we've been through medical centre by medical centre, identifying what is readily available from a 2018 survey. And that takes over 500 dementia patients and indeed a similar number of learning difficulties patients. And the view seemed to be from the medical centres that we've talked to is that there's a 40% underrepresentation on those numbers at the moment. As we know, there's a bit of a stigma attached to dementia, and so often those patients are not registered. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 4 little points. Hopefully I'm not going to drag on for too long. First point, Dr. Walsh, was the state of the building. You said it had not been occupied for, I think, 5 years. Is that going to cause you a lot of work to put that straight? Secondly, from a very selfish perspective, should this centre open, would you reach into the Ivors? Because we have a good many people down there that could use a facility such as this. In fact, I've been asked specifically in the last few weeks what our dementia care programme is going to be for the Ivors. Thirdly, is your project well funded? And fourthly, more of a technical question, when the neighbourhood plan for Denham can be considered in relation to this? Is it live now, or where are we with the neighbourhood plan?
And probably the technical question on the neighbourhood plan will be for a planning officer to respond to.
No, later.
Later. We'll take that one later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Griffin. Yes, you're right. Having been empty for 5 years and not been especially looked after from South Bucks District Council, it is in a very poor state. Nevertheless, it can be put right, and it would be cheaper to put it right than to demolish the centre and then rebuild a centre. So the centre, by and large, has been purpose-built in the past. It was run by the Red Cross Centre, and it was only this policy of sending, patients to far-flung places that caused it to close, and the site of Burnham was selected. As far as the residents are concerned, one of the reasons for taking the plan to the Ivors Community Board is that we would expect to be able to extend to the Ivors residents. Ivors residents did come to the Red Cross Centre. We expect to be able to extend to the residents of Gerrards Cross and the surrounding parishes as well. So it's not a strict boundary project at all. In fact, we would welcome those residents. In terms of being well funded, we've gone a certain way, but clearly with a planning application hanging over it, we haven't gone as far as we might. And we have to be careful as well that we would be using the budget of Denham Parish Council residents with a degree of uncertainty still hanging over the site. But having said that, one of the facilities that parish councils enjoy that county councils, unitary councils do not, is that we have a precept which will help to fund some of that. But more importantly than that, we also have access to a public works loan as well. And we've had a look at what is required. We've talked to the public works loan people, and they see us reasonably well set up so that when we can press the button, then that loan would be available to us. But it is a significant figure, as you can imagine, in terms of refurbishing a site like that, and all, unfortunately, due to the degradation allowed by a previous district council, which is, close to criminal, I would suggest. As far as the neighbourhood plan is concerned, we've moved on since the officer's report. We have had the neighbourhood plan back from the inspector now. There are one or two things just to tidy up on his suggestion, but it is ready then for referendum. So as soon as we go back to him, we don't have to, but we would prefer to. He's complimented us on the plan so far, and when we go back to him, we're looking at probably a couple of weeks or so when the plan would be ready for referendum. And then it's a judgment for the parish council as to when's the best time to do that, given the COVID situation that we all face. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else got any questions or qualifications they wish to ask? No? If not, thank you very much, Councillor Walsh, and thank you very much for answering our questions. So if you'll remain in the meeting, hopefully, to hear the result of our debate, we can now move on, and I would like to call forward Mrs. Jo West and Mr. George Yates, the applicant and the applicant's agent. Now, you're already seated, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is George Yates. I'm a Chartered Planner and Associate Partner at Knight Frank. I'm here to present to members a detailed proposal relating to the former Tile House Centre in Denham. We are in the midst of a housing crisis, and Buckinghamshire is no exception to this. Here there's an identified housing shortfall against local needs and a documented deficit in the 5-year land supply. Planning law requires applications to be determined in accordance with adopted policies, unless material considerations suggest otherwise. Here before members is an application that the Council's own officers have found to be policy compliant, sustainable and ultimately approvable. The proposal is the culmination of around 6 years' work dating back to when adult social care deemed the site surplus to requirements back in 2015. The Property and Assets team then began looking at alternative options, and a positive pre-application was received in 2019. The Council's property team has been in ongoing dialogue with adult social care, who have maintained, even as recently as November 2020, that there is no requirement for property-based commissioned services in this area, and that the demand is already being met by other facilities. Further to this, an application to list the property as an asset of community value was rejected, as it did not meet the regulations. If approved, this application will provide 7 family homes, providing accommodation for over 30 people. 3 of the homes being proposed will be 3-bed, affordable rented properties, of which there is an acute shortage in the local area. All of this will be provided on a brownfield site that has been deemed surplus to requirements and is quickly becoming derelict. We note the objections based on the draft neighbourhood plan, but as a matter of planning law, this document can be given limited weight only. The application includes a full suite of technical site assessments in relation to matters such as ecology, highways and sustainable drainage. It also puts forward an attractive and high quality design. We're very pleased to support the recommendation of the officer for approval. This planning application complies with adopted policies and will provide family housing on a surplus brownfield site. We hope members feel able to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, do you have any points of clarification on this? Councillor Matthews.
Thank you. Yes, I'd just like to ask how you have determined that there's no need for daycare provision in this area, and I can confirm with the position that Councillor Griffin outlined just now. that in our ward in Ivor, there is a huge need for this type of provision. As Councillor Walsh has already said, the Burnham Centre is full and cannot take any more, and the only option then would be to go to High Wycombe, which is just totally impossible with that type of person. So I'd like to know how you get to that conclusion.
The application in front of you is based purely on a property put forward application. We are informed by adult social care. We're not part of the planning team for the adult social care department, and as such we can only take their word for what they're telling us, that there is no need for property-based adult social care commission services. That's not to say that there aren't needs for services, but they have quite categorically told us there's no need for property-based commission services at this time.
If I could just say, I remember this at the daycare centre review, which wasn't carried out according to on programme times. It did have some hiccups along the way. I'm just concerned that you're talking about a 2015 service review, which is what I've just heard. Currently, we have in southern Buckinghamshire an ever-increasing number of very, very elderly people. And I just wondered, when do you anticipate that you would update your review on the requirements of our ever-ageing population in the south, in this deep south of the county? So when will that occur? When will we revisit the figures?
Again, as per my colleague's statement, we have been in constant dialogue with the adult social care team, who even towards the end of last year informed us as a property team that there is no need for property-based services. I can't comment on what the adult social care review
so we don't know how accurate their review is and how far forward they're predicting it.
As I say, as far as we're concerned, we're here to review just the planning application, not the need for the social care in the area. That will be made later down the line when we know whether or not this is an option. We've already advised the Denham Parish Council that we could look at doing a joint mixed-use development with community facilities and housing that they rejected, unfortunately, so we haven't been able to progress with that. We have said, as a property team, Councillor Chilver has invited Denham Parish Council to present their proposal, which will be considered alongside the property proposal in the round to decide what the future use of the site will be. We're here today to see whether or not this planning application is one of those options that could be decided.
This meeting is happening next week, did you say, with the two cabinet members?
There's a meeting on Friday.
This Friday?
This Friday.
Right, thank you for that. Councillor Hollis.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I think you might have been ill-advised by the Commissioners of Adult Health and Social Care. Last year they told me the diametrically opposite of what you're telling me, that they felt that the whole 2015 review had gone a step too far and that services had become far too centralised and inaccessible, and that they would welcome with open arms someone who is prepared to come forward and bail them out of a ditch when they're hanging on by their fingernails and offer them £1 million plan to treat the most needy and deserving people in a level 5 area of deprivation. These are people with dementia and people with learning disabilities. So I think whoever told you that is missing. Well, I can name one of the two officers who told you. I'm not going to here, obviously not. That's completely inappropriate. But you, sir, desperately needed homes in an area that's providing 600 homes, a ward that's providing 600 homes already. It sounds to me like you're putting profit before people here. I don't understand why you're so driven to say that. It's so voguish to say, build, 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 more and more homes. How is this sustainable development if you do not provide for social services and other things that people need?
I think that is more of a speech, Councillor Hollis, than a request for information and clarification.
Chairman, if I may respond to the first point that Councillor Hollis made, in the planning application documentation, there's appendix in there which has got the response from Councillor Chilver and Councillor Macpherson as Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care, which confirmed the same. So it's not just officers that's come from, it's gone up through the Cabinet members for those areas as well.
Yep. Anyway, we've noticed that in the body of the report they say they would welcome a meeting, the two Cabinet members, which does pose the question, why are they pushing on with a planning application? Perhaps I'm just old and confused, and this centre will be a help to me. Right, anyone else asking any clarification? Yes, Councillor Broom.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to sort of go further down the rabbit hole on this point about consultation with Denham Parish Council, because you did mention just now that you had some contact with them. So can you shed any further light on why proper consultation with Denham Parish Council didn't take place?
That is all part of the decision-making process that will happen when it comes to the stage of deciding what the future of this site will be. This stage is just purely looking at the practicalities of the art of the possible, if you like. So is this proposal for housing one of the options that can be considered against the Denham Parish Council offering, any other devolution style offerings that come forward? But we can't consider all of the options unless we know what the options are. So we're here today. That, Chairman, is also why we have been advised to push ahead with the planning application, so we know whether this is one of the options that can be considered by the councillors that will make the decision in due course.
And just to follow up on one other thing, has the revenue stream that would be generated by this development we're considering taking place, has that been factored already into any future budget plans?
The capital receipt, if this were to be sold, has been put into a potential future budget, but not spent, as it were. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any questions or points of clarification? No? Right, well, thank you very much, Mrs. West and Mr. Yates, for answering our request for clarification and for your contribution. So now we move on to opening the application for debate. Any councillor wishing to speak and ask. Oh, we haven't asked technical questions of the officers, sorry. So has anyone got any technical questions for Mr. Regan before we move on to a debate amongst ourselves? Yes, Councillor Bratton.
Thank you. I particularly focused on point 512, where, if I understand, well, perhaps I could clarify exactly how does this proposal comply with local plan policy COM2 from a technical perspective?
So, policy COM2, it sets out the various criteria where the proposals involving the loss of community facility will be acceptable. Also, there's 4 scenarios, of which criteria D is the most relevant in this instance, which sets out that in the case of a community facility that's provided by a local authority, which is the case in this instance, a loss of that facility can be permitted if the site is proposed to be put to use, which would meet another local need, such as affordable housing. So in this instance, given the site is providing that provision towards affordable housing, it's considered that it specifically meets that criteria of criteria D of COM2, and therefore is compliant with that policy.
So I think two points. Firstly, I mean, to me as a non-lawyer, but I read this and this policy says A or B or C, and in the case of the community D, it doesn't say if it meets D. So the way I understood this policy, it would be that you would have to be meeting A, B or C and D if in the case of something being proposed by a local authority. So I didn't really understand how this would meet. I mean, more generally, I think as a matter of judgment, it's not clear how doing this, meeting other local needs, as other people have commented, how it would substantively meet local needs in a meaningful way relative to the other developments that are going on in the area.
The policy does go into specifics in terms of the level of need that it needs to meet, but it does specifically set out that one of those other needs is affordable housing, of which there is a general need within the district. So in that sense, it's considered that it does, it's meeting that criteria of that policy.
Anyone else with a question? I'll take Councillor Matthews and then come back to Councillor Broom.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. Could I ask you said at one point, I think, that you said that there was an extant planning permission for the 3 dwellings at the front of the site. I can't see that referenced in the application documentation. So can you take us through that? How old is that application? And it could be enacted still?
So there's not an extant permission for 3 dwellings at the front, but as part of the, and on the represented it on the screen. So planning permission was granted under reference 0801627 FUL, of which has part been built out, and that's what now consists of Ranston Close. But that scheme, while looking at the approved plans, that scheme itself did in fact include an additional block that is sited, that would have been sited in the same location as what's being proposed now as the plots 1 to 3. So there is an argument that because that scheme has been implemented, there is a case that it could be built out and completed and involve residential development at the front of the site in the form of an additional flatted development.
Yeah. I'm a bit confused on that issue. You're saying that the land at the front, which is the county council's land, was part of the planning application for that close next door.
When looking at the approved plans of that permission, it involved the land at the front of what is this application site. Why it wasn't built out is obviously is another matter, and for the obviously the relevant landowners but the approved scheme that was approved under that reference included built form on what is now this application site.
So we don't know why it wasn't built out. We don't know if it wasn't economical or whatever. Right. Councillor Broom.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to return to the point that was made by my colleague, Councillor Bracken, about the COM2 policy. It seems very obvious to me, and it's very precisely worded, that there are 3 ors and an and. And so the and would make it an additive provision, a further test that you would have to meet in addition to the other 3. Now that seems perfectly obvious to me. And the logic of working it the other way round is simply that any development that involved the loss of community facilities that Bucks Council wanted to undertake could be justified under that policy by the provision of any affordable housing whatsoever. So can you clarify, because I don't think you answered Councillor Bracken, do you acknowledge the fact that there is different wording within the 4 points there? And would you confirm that if the interpretation that you take were to be carried forwards, that would allow any proposal by Bucks Council with any affordable housing in it to be justified under this policy.
So my interpretation and knowledge of the application of this policy throughout my time at South Bucks is that the criteria D is being applied as a standalone, as a fourth criteria that provides an option. So in that sense, any existing community facility that is provided by the local authority could be lost if it's meeting an alternative need as set out in the policy, including affordable housing.
If I could just come back on that, Chair, I just want to push this point of clarification. That there is specific wording used for each of the four provisions. 3 of them have an or, 1 of them has an and. Are we just disregarding certain parts of the wording of this policy?
I could only give my opinion in terms of my interpretation of that wording, and obviously that's the wording and then the approach that's been agreed and signed off on in terms of being the appropriate one. So.
Members, any other questions from members for the officers? Councillor Sandy?
Well, it's a small point, I think, Chairman, but you know, with 4-bedroom houses, we're finding increasingly older people are occupying the spare bedrooms. Youngsters are staying at home, living with their parents much longer, and the result is that a 4-bedroom house is likely to have more than 2 cars, possibly even as many as 4. That would be exceptional, I imagine, but do you think there is sufficient parking provided there? Because if there isn't, there's going to be an overspill into the highway, it was called. I don't know how busy a road that is, but would it create parking problems elsewhere if indeed the density of housing there is as great as it is with as little parking as there is?
In terms of parking provision, the level of parking provision actually exceeds what would be considered appropriate in terms of looking at our adopted parking provision. The 3-bed units are all served by 2 spaces, and the 4-bed units are allocated 3 spaces each, and there's an additional 2 spaces that will be allocated that will be utilised as visitor spaces. So the Highway Authority haven't objected and considered that it wouldn't lead to any adverse highway implications as a result of on-street parking as a result of the scheme.
Councillor Matthews.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask about the Denham Neighbourhood Plan. You say in the report that there are issues with that that are still to be resolved. Are those issues related to this particular application and site? And also, the information in the report is somewhat different from the information that was provided to us by Councillor Walsh. So can you clarify, please?
Mr. Robinson said he indicated he'd like to answer this one.
Thank you, Chairman. I did seek clarification on this issue. Essentially, during the consultation process for the neighbourhood plan, there was responses that said that it was issues with the way it was consulted upon, and therefore the examiner would need to take a judgment on that, whether the whole neighbourhood plan had been dealt with correctly. So, because there was unresolved objections, the advice I was given by the policy team was it would carry limited weight. Since the report was published, the examiner hasn't yet published his report in relation to that, and therefore the statement in the report is still correct at this time.
However, if I could just say, we are encouraging, as a policy, neighbourhood plans to be produced by town and parish councils. And there is a lot of talk about the new emerging, or just started, Buckinghamshire plan will be bottom up and not top down. So I would have thought that if you had a completed neighbourhood plan, all right, it's got technical issues to go to, but I would have thought that would have carried substantial weight with the new policy. I know that the Chiltern and South Bucks approach was not to encourage neighbourhood plans, but now we're being openly encouraged to do neighbourhood plans. So if it's a policy of Buckinghamshire Council, perhaps we should be giving them more weight and looking at them differently, as though that we support them and not oppose them. But now, Mr. Vice Chairman, you wanted...
Yeah, just very briefly. I mean, I have seen the inspector's report with regard to the neighbourhood plan, and I can tell you categorically that the inspector has no issue whatsoever with policy Den 9 of that neighbourhood plan, which is the one that dictates how the loss of community facilities should be resisted. He has issues with other little things like maps and drawings and technical stuff like that. But Den 9 policy itself, there is no objection to that policy within his report.
Councillor Mattis.
Can I just come back then?
Yep.
So can I clarify that the objections that were outstanding that you referred to in your report did or did not refer to this particular site?
The objection didn't refer to this site, but it did apply to the plan as a whole, and therefore, in terms of the weight that we can give it, whilst there's been unresolved objections to the plan, we can only give it limited weight. Also, it's been confirmed by the policy team that the examiner hasn't yet publicly published his report, so there isn't a published report in relation to the April plan. Therefore, as it stands, as we stand at this moment, we can only give it limited weight.
Right, thank you for that. Councillor Griffin, you indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. I can't for the life of me find it now because there are lots of extensive reports here, but perhaps our planning officers can point me in the right direction. I'm sure I read when I first reviewed this that there's a recommendation somewhere that 2 of the properties be removed from the plan due to proximity to the woodland, or gardens being within 15 metres. I'm sure you know your reports better than I do at the moment, so I can't quite find it. But I'm sure it said that it recommended 2 of the properties be removed from the plan.
I think that has been resolved, hasn't it, with the distance away from the woodland now? I did notice it in the report, but I thought it had been resolved.
So
Historic Woodlands UK, whatever it is, Historic Woodlands in...
Yes, so that issue related to the ancient woodland that lies to the rear of the site and concerns that the proximity of the rearmost plots 6 and 7 that they fell within the buffer zone because their standing advice for ancient woodland says there should be a 15-metre buffer and that the land shouldn't really be used as residential garden space. On those issues, the council's arboriculturists doesn't raise any issues in terms of physical impacts on the trees themselves as a result of the built form, and the fact that that existing land that lies within that 15-metre buffer is already or could be used as a residential property that's serving that existing property. The actual use of that land stays the same. So the buffer zone is residential garden at present, and it would remain so. So it's considered there'll be no greater impacts on the ancient woodland.
If no one else has got any questions, I have some I'd like answered. Can you confirm if the council has attempted to market the site when we look for a change of use, particularly on commercial properties? We always expect to have a report on the marketing of the site if people are saying it's not required. Has that been done by the council?
I'm not aware of such marketing taking place.
No, they haven't. They just said it's been empty for 5 years, so it's surplus. Not a very scientific approach by the council, which we wouldn't accept from a private developer, I would suggest. That concerns me. Can you tell me what the density of this development is compared to Ranston Close, the L&Q development next door?
I can't give you the precise density figure of the Ranston Close one. The development itself would result in
25.9, isn't it, or something you say?
Yeah, 25.9 dwellings per hectare density.
So we don't know how it compares with the development next door. So
no, I just as looking at that development by the naked eye, that it's considered that Ranston Close would be of a higher density than what this development would be proposing.
Yeah, Ranston Close would be. Yeah, I thought that when I looked at the site. Even with my ancient eyes, I could see that. The other issue is that if we haven't carried out any marketing, the MPPF, which you refer to in para 5.3 of your report, says effective use of land meeting the needs of housing and other uses. Do we think that just putting this small number of houses as an effective use of the land, if you are going to use it as housing land, and if it was to be approved, and I assume the council's not a property developer, I don't believe they're a residential developer, it's going to be sold to the highest bidder, I assume. So would that not leave the door open for someone to come back with a much denser application quoting better use of land?
Obviously, if that was the case and it was sold on, then obviously
the council won't develop it itself, will it? They don't do building, do they?
I can't comment on that. But in terms of a future developer taking the sites, obviously they'd be perfectly entitled to put a revised scheme in that could potentially be for a higher density. Then it would be for the council to assess whether a scheme that's higher in density is acceptable in terms of the nature of the units that are being provided, its form, and its impact on neighbouring properties. So, a revised scheme that provides more units itself brings with it different challenges and different aspects that need to be investigated, and whether it's deemed appropriate or not. So it's not necessarily a given that a higher denser scheme will be considered acceptable on this site.
Well, we won't know what will happen once it's been sold. I don't think that we've met the qualification of effective use of land at the moment, because it's a very small housing provision with 3 affordable units, and that's being weighed against the other uses that are referred to in NPPF, i.e. that's the removal of the opportunity for a day centre. Yes, Councillor Anthony.
Thank you, Chairman. Whilst this looks to be quite an attractive development, certainly I can't see any planning concerns about it. There are 2 things that I'm uncomfortable about. One is recognising that the emerging neighbourhood plan carries limited weight, but as far as I can see, it carries no weight in this application, which is surprising to me, particularly in view of the parish council's strong support of an alternative approach. And the other is, as the chairman just mentioned, the concept of equivalence. Can it be serious?
Could you move closer to the mic, please?
Sorry. Can it be seriously contended that 3 affordable housing units is equivalent to a day opportunity centre? They're just a different scale altogether, and I think that has to be taken into account. But I have reservations about the application on planning grounds.
Thank you. Any other contributions to the debate?
Is it technical questions?
Well, I think we've run out of technical questions now.
I would like to.
Councillor
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to clarify, is this the debate or are we still in technical questions?
We are now moving into the debate, yes. I think we've exhausted the technical questions.
Right, okay. Can I make a contribution, please, then?
You certainly can, I've just said.
Thank you. Okay. Right, I've obviously been listening to what's been said, and my impression is that we've got a tale of two councils, it sounds like to me. On the one hand, I'm quite impressed that we've got an enterprising council here which has identified a brownfield site, and it's identified that housing is a priority and it should do something with it. That's all good. But the other side is somewhat embarrassing and troubling for me, because obviously housing is not the council's only priority. And the other side of the picture that I'm getting is that basically a litany of failures on behalf of the council, because we've had plenty of evidence about the lack of communication, not only with other potential stakeholders, but even within the council's own departments. That's quite troubling. Also, we've heard about the lack of engagement when this idea was floated as to whether or not it was something that would fit into the community. I think that's also a failure on part of the council. And also the lack of joined up thinking between the different bits of the council. I'm not convinced that the COM2 policy test has been correctly applied, or applied at all indeed. And I think taking all of that into consideration, Mr. Chairman, I was wondering whether you would want to invite the applicant to withdraw this application.
I was going to sum up at the end of the debate, Councillor Chocker, and I might well use words of that kind, but I will wait to hear the rest of the committee's debate. Councillor Hollis, you were indicating.
Thank you. Right, so yes, as a retired healthcare professional, primary healthcare professional, 3 years standing member of the Adult Health and Social Care Select Committee, I am somebody who, unlike all the officers here, has read the documents which would dictate the relevance of whether or not a community centre should remain open or more housing be built. The most significant of these is the Council's own Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. If you indulge me, I'd just like to read through what it says about dementia. The Dementia 2010 report revealed that the cost of dementia in the UK is twice that of cancer, 3 times that of heart disease, and 4 times as much as stroke. Dementia costs the UK economy £23.4 billion a year. Family carers of people with dementia save the UK public purse over £12 billion a year. By 2040, whilst the number of people affected is expected to double, it is claimed that the costs are likely to treble due to inflation in healthcare costs. Dementia increases the risk of care home placement at least 4 times over. Across the UK, an average of only 44% of people living with dementia have a formal diagnosis. And there are a series of graphs here I will not bore you with. Demand and gap analysis at the back of this. The annual growth rate of Bucks population in all ages is 0.7%, 65 plus at 3 times higher at 2.2%, 80 plus at 3.7%, from 2015 to 2020, the 90-plus age group is expecting the highest rise of 30%. That incidence of 1 in 4 dementia in that particular cohort. Through data analysis, consultation with service users, carers and professionals, key themes have emerged. These themes indicate a gap in service provision or the need for improvements to be made as follows. And then there follows a list. I won't read it all to you, but from that list, more meaningful, cost-effective and local day opportunities and improved access to generic community-based facilities. So that's the Council's own Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. On a technical level, I think that even if one parks COM2 and CP6 to one side, even DEN 9, and just simply looks at the NPPF, and if one invokes its clause 11D 1 and 2 to apply the tilted balance and looks at the NPPF policies in the round, then that which the chairman had to say was highly relevant. In addition to that, in Section 8, promoting healthy and safe communities. Planning policies and decisions should aim to achieve healthy, inclusive and safe places which promote social interaction, including opportunities for meetings between people who might not otherwise come into contact with each other. That's 91A. 91C, enable and support healthy lifestyles. 92, to provide the social, recreational, cultural facilities and services the community needs. Planning policies and decisions should A, plan positively for the provision and use of community facilities. C, guard against the loss of valued facilities and services. D, ensure that facilities and services are able to develop and modernize. And E, ensure an integrated approach to considering the location of community facilities. And that sums it up for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Matthews and Councillor Bloom.
Thank you. I'd just like to go back to the neighbourhood plan. Having recently had the benefit of the views of our two QCs on this matter in terms of the impact on weight of neighbourhood plans in the absence of any local up-to-date plan, then I think the balance is that neighbourhood plan, the Denham neighbourhood plan, given its current progress through its Regulation 14 and Regulation 16 consultations, should carry more than limited weight. So I think that's not been considered properly in the balance. And I also think if you relate to COM2, point D, it says that the site is proposed to be used for a use which would meet local needs, which includes affordable housing. Well, this site is not a use for affordable housing. It's being put to a use for some affordable housing, i.e. 3 units, which are already next door to a site which already provides affordable housing. It's an LQ site, and as of this morning, there were a number of empty units within that site already. So I think the balance of need of the social housing aspect of this against the significant demand that there is for adult daycare provision is very well tipped in the direction of the daycare provision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brum.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 broad points to make. The first is specifically on the planning policy, and it comes back to this issue of COM2, which was identified by Councillor Bracken. I think we've gone into in some detail. I have to say, I think that to call the interpretation that's being taken of this as novel would probably be the kindest way of looking at it. I think it's an entirely incorrect interpretation based on a plain text reading of what is in front of us. And so for that reason, I think it simply does not meet the test of the planning policy. I also think that the interpretation that is proposed, and which I hope will not be carried forwards, would essentially allow for the negation of this element of planning policy. It would not be a realistic consideration given the very, very broad way in which it seems to be currently being interpreted. The second broad point I would make is to concur with Councillor Chokar that there are a number of elements of the way that the process of this has taken place, which I find extremely concerning. I think one cannot shake the suspicion that this site has been identified as a potential revenue stream, and then all other interpretations have simply been facilitated.
I don't think you can actually assume that. I think that's...
I'm speaking purely hypothetically, Chair. I'm speaking purely hypothetically. But no, I mean, there's a litany of problems. I think primarily for me, the total lack of consultation with Denham Parish Council, which seems to have been identified and doesn't seem to have been denied by anybody when I have repeatedly asked the question of various officers. And I was quite astounded to hear coming from one of our contributors the idea that there is no need for this service in this area. It doesn't pass the laugh test for any of us who have been out and speaking to local residents. And my day job is working in one of our local MP's parliamentary offices, and I can tell you simply from the casework in that regard that there is an immense need for this kind of service. And so while I would confine my objection in terms of the planning policy to COM2, I think there are much wider concerns here, and perhaps a recommendation from this committee that some of them be...
Asked for a recommendation.
No, Chair. I'm saying some recommendation, perhaps from the chair of this committee to the appropriate select committee to look into some of these processes would be advisable.
Anyone else want to make a contribution? No indication. I think we've given this a very long airing for one application. I would just say in my summing up that that we have a very detailed report before us, which has enabled us to raise a number of issues. So I think that is a plus, that it has been addressed and it has raised issues that we are concerned about. I'm very conscious that the recommendation says on page 23, paragraph 8, says that permission be deferred and delegated to the Director of Planning Environment to grant permission subject to conditions, etc., etc. I'm not happy with the wording of that recommendation because, as those of you who've sat on planning before and know me from other councils, I'm never happy to delegate to officers decisions that I feel should be made by councillors. And particularly on planning, I like to have everything buttoned down on planning applications without any delegation and further meetings to be had with developers or applicants. So the first, looking at where we are, we know that the report says that the two cabinet members in question would like to have a meeting. We've heard from Denham Parish Council that that's going to be this Friday and that there's going to be talks. I think we've all got a concern that it's not the best use of the appropriate powers and policies of the MPPF. And certainly I don't think 3 affordable housings is going to make a huge difference to the housing need in the south of the county. Limited at the best, I would say. So what I would suggest is that we should, and it is very unusual, to defer an application, but as there are ongoing talks with the cabinet members and the neighbourhood plan is progressing on, and I am somewhat disappointed that with all the emphasis we've had thrust upon us on neighbourhood plans, which I don't disagree with, I've always supported them, that so little weight is given to an emerging district plan. Councillor Matthews has already said of the training we had from Landmark Chambers that there's more importance being placed on neighbourhood plans when you don't have a local plan. And our local plan won't be completed for at least 3 years. It's got to be, well, it's going to be 4 years, I think, at this council, because there's a massive amount of work to do, and we know the challenges on local plans, that they were to and fro between the inspectors for months and months. So I believe that the neighbourhood plan should be given more weight. I know planning policy don't agree with me, but that is my personal view, and I would like to see that this permission be deferred until further discussions are taken place with the Denham Parish Council, and more consideration is given to the emerging Denham neighbourhood plan. That, I think, is a way forward. I don't see that it impacts anything. I don't see why you have to have planning permission if you're weighing up the pros and cons of various land use. I don't understand that at all. So, as your chairman, that is my view. But I'd like to thank the officers and the speakers for taking all our questions, because it's been a very detailed debate and question and answer session. But now it is over to the members of the planning committee if someone wishes to make a recommendation. Councillor Chopper.
Mr. Chairman, I've listened to what you've said, and I can understand your reasoning. But I wanted you to give some more thought to my suggestion, which is that this application really shouldn't have been made in the first place, because it's quite embarrassing the way that it's been managed, and I don't know what we're going to achieve by deferring it.
Well, my view is, in answer to that, is that we achieve the meetings that are going to be held with cabinet members and how the emerging neighbourhood plan will be met. I find that as a way forward, because then it would have to come back to this committee. And if the appropriate consultations haven't been carried out, if everything hasn't been given what we consider is due weight, that is a way forward. If we reject it, but it is for the committee to decide, if you want to make a recommendation that we reject it, I'm just thinking of the challenges that will follow, but it is up to the committee.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I understand that, and I don't want to sort of make things more complicated than they already are. But I was wondering whether the applicant wants to actually voluntarily withdraw it. That was my sort of suggestion to you, to invite that.
Does the applicant wish to continue? I assume so, as it's on the agenda. No. Yeah. I know it is, yeah, and that's what I want. You don't. If we defer the application, I've just had a consultation with my senior officer, you can then use that deferral period to decide if you want to go ahead with it, what the cabinet members who are important in deciding what they want to do with the piece of land. I think the advice is that only defers it, and it gives time for further talks to take place, because I know we're placing you in a position, if we ask for a deferral, you've got to discuss it with cabinet members. So I think that's going to be a step too far, Councillor Chocker. I wouldn't recommend that being seconded.
Chairman,
yes.
yeah, I'd be happy with that if I thought I could trust the officers to be reasonable in their deliberations with us.
Please do not make personal comments.
Okay.
We don't allow personal comments at planning. If we defer it, it will go The meeting can take place with the Cabinet members. They can discuss it with Cabinet or whatever, and then it will come back to us as another application. Yes. Yes, Councillor Griffin.
Chairman, I just wondered, do we set the deferral period?
Ben, can you give me some advice on that?
It depends on how long the deferral period would be, because obviously if we're coming back to planning committee, we'd want to update the report, and indeed as time moves on, circumstances might change, particularly in terms of the weight that can be given to the neighbourhood plan, because by then you may have an examiner's report, and the weight as the advice that we were given from the barristers is the more down the process it gets, the more weight it carries. So we would need time to produce that report. So we would want to be given enough time to be able to do that. So I wouldn't suggest that you defer it, say it has to come to the next planning committee, for example, because that would only give a couple of weeks at best to allow for that. But we would, even if you didn't set a date, we would look to get it back to the committee as soon as possibly can, allowing for the consultations that would be taking place with relevant officers and cabinet members.
Councillor Chocker.
Sorry about this, Mr. Chairman. I'm still not convinced exactly what the deferral is going to achieve, because I think the evidence we've had here today, what it's shown is that getting up to this application is where things have gone wrong. And I think Councillor Broom did make the suggestion to you that, this lessons learnt type of thing, so that other bits of the council will appreciate how not to make an application like this. This deferral, I think, we're basically providing a fig leaf for the applicant to say, well, sorry, we're not going to go ahead with that anymore. So I don't know. I'm just not very comfortable recognising all the things that have gone wrong. That we just defer it as though it was something we needed a bit more information. That's my sort of concern.
Well, I think the issue of the deferral gives the applicant the ability to decide whether they wish to proceed or not. And we live in a land of cabinet government, and therefore they have processes to go through internally as well. And I believe it provides us with a breathing space. We can actually decide the wording now we have 2 days to decide on the final wording, don't we, of any recommendation from this committee now. So I think we can find a form of words that will say that we want the consultation, etc., etc. I think we can cover the issues that have been raised at this meeting in the reasons for our referral. But if you want to make a proposition, we need to make a decision because time's going on. If you do, we'll see if you've got a seconder.
No, I don't think I'm going to push it. But can I ask you, Mr. Chairman, will you please take up the suggestion that's been made to you, because there's quite a few things which have gone wrong here.
Yep. And
we would like, hopefully for this planning committee, for you to be able to come back and say that you've spoken to whoever needs to be spoken to, and that you have a commitment from them that this sort of situation is not going to arise again. Subject to that, I'll be guided by you.
I think I can take away the views of this committee and explain them. We might even be able to put something in the wording of our refusal, which will go out to you. But we do have 48 hours now under the new constitution, which might appear on the website any day. We only agreed it 3 months ago, whereby we have the leeway on complicated issues to actually have a discussion with officers. and the chairman to actually agree the final word, in which we will circulate before we send it off. So that is I will make that as a proposal. So do I have a seconder?
I would second that, Chairman.
Thank you. Can we take a vote on that? All those in favour of the proposal, the recommendation? Not many to count, Claire. Just 4. Against?
I've got 9 in favour.
There's 10 of us. I make it 9-4 and one against.
Sorry, Chairman, who is against?
It's 9-4 and 1 against.
9 in favour and 1 against.
Yep. Right. Thank you very much for that. It's been a long and useful debate, and I think we've actually highlighted, Councillor Chocker, some issues that we want to avoid in the future. Right. We have now got to move on to agenda item 6, which can be found on page 45 of the agenda pack. It's application reference PL 210067 VRC, variation of condition 10, approved plans of planning permission PL / 192297 FA, erection of new detached dwelling, alterations to planning permission PL 18/2313 FA to allow for minor amendments to approved plans at 50A Hogfair Lane, Burnham, Buckinghamshire, SL1 7HQ. As that description says, it's already has planning permission, and this is only for some minor amendments. I will now call upon our case officer, Adam Peckley, to introduce the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Permission is sought for the following changes, and the remainder of the dwelling as on site benefits from a previous planning permission PL/19/2297/FA. The changes subject of this application are: the variations involve the alterations in the shape and size of the rear dormer windows, the repositioning of the rear roof lights, change from a pitched roof to a crown roof on the single-storey side extension, and alterations to fenestration. History. I'll just go to the site plan, satellite view. The planning permission for a detached dwelling was originally granted in this location in 2017. In late 2019/early 2020, whilst during works to implement a planning approval, reports were and a planning enforcement investigation was conducted in that something was being built not per the approved plans, namely an enlarged rear dormer window was being constructed on the rear elevation. This led to planning enforcement requesting the cessation of works whilst investigating an alleged breach of planning control. In the end, this element of construction, which is on the photograph there, was considered unacceptable, and the view was that they were not building to an approved planning permission. Therefore, an enforcement notice was served to demolish the property in February 2020. During the appeal process against this enforcement notice, the applicant removed the rear dormer window. As the council's objections and reason for the enforcement notice primarily related to that enlarged rear dormer window, the planning inspectorate was not sure as to the continuing purpose of the enforcement notice, and therefore it was quashed. Planning permission PL/19/2297/FA was granted on 19th of December 2019 with 4 smaller dormer windows and represents the fallback position. I'm now going to talk you through the plans. So this is a site location and block plan submitted with the application. There is a clarification I will add later in that there is a difference between the previous approval location plan and this plan, so I will go into more detail on that later. This is a satellite view of the site. The red pin represents 50A Hogfair Lane, the application site. Number 50 Hogfair Lane has 50 on the roof of that, and Hogfair Lane is to the east. Windsor Lane is to the west. The photographs I've previously been through. This here, the dwelling is more substantially completed than this photograph. However, this is by and large what is on site at the moment. The proposed floor plans and elevations. Come back to those if you need. And this is a concept drawing submitted by the planning agent. The existing approval and current wall position comparison. So you will note that there is blue walls on those two plans, and that was the existing approval. And then there are beige walls, which is the current as it exists on site. I think I'll just draw your attention particularly to on the right-hand drawing. The topmost of those drawing is those 4 rear dormer windows that you can see. So obviously that's one of the alterations under this application. And that's all I've got for those. So on the red edge location plan, the application is a variation of condition to a previous planning approval, and therefore the red edge plan should remain as submitted under the previous reference PL/19/2297. And if in the report on Appendix B, you will note that the red edge there includes an element of land leading up to the highway. It is noted that the red location plan is different as submitted on this application. It is therefore considered that if this application is approved, reference in the approved plans condition must be given to the previous location plan, not the one on screen at the moment. The reason for that is it's a variation application, not for full planning, so you can't then go and change the red edge. That has been picked up now. There's also an issue that I'll come to at the end of my statement here. Concern recently has been raised. We had further letters of objection that I'm about to go into. But the applicant, there's concern that he has not signed the right ownership certificate, and I will go into that in a moment. We've had recent letters on that. I will come to that at the end as the implications for that. Since the officer report, we've had 4 further letters stating the following, and I've summarised. I also have copies, enough for anyone if they wish to have a look at those. There's concern raised over condition 1 of the officer's report about the actual need to resubmit a landscaping plan and risk potentially removing further trees given we've already had a landscape plan approved. First comment obviously is we would assess any further plan carefully. However, I am in agreement with the concerns raised in terms of that point, and we do have a previous landscape approval. Again, I've got copies if you wish to see it, but I'm proposing to slightly alter condition 1 to, instead of requiring them to submit a new landscape plan, we tie them to the previous landscape plan on the previous approval. Other comments raised on the letters received this week. There were concerns over errors in the application form. Those are noted. They're not considered to materially alter the officer's recommendation. The officer has obviously been to the site and conducted a visit as part of this application. Lack of parking, no objection was raised on the previous approval, and there's no change to the policy under the 4 alterations I've referred to. Poor design, this has been considered in the officer report. Dominating height, no change in the overall height of the dwelling since previous approval. Impact on privacy, this has been considered in the officer report. Concern over size of the plot, no change on the previous approval. Only the 4 specific changes that I mentioned at the beginning are subject to this application. No objection was or is raised here. Front of the property design concerns, this already benefits from approval. No change as part of this application. Summary. This application is only considering the variation to involve the alterations in the shape and size of the rear dormer windows, the repositioning of the rear roof lights, change from a pitched roof to a crown roof on the single-storey side extension, and alterations to fenestration. Everything else in this dwelling benefits from planning permission. Changes do not raise objection in relation to design as assessed. In relation to neighbour amenity, the rear dormer windows have not moved position relative to neighbouring properties compared to the previous approval. It is noted that the back-to-back distances to the rear property, 218 Alpha Windsor Lane, were such that the property would not be adversely impacted in terms of loss of light, loss of privacy, or appearing over-dominant or obtrusive. Measurements taken on-site by the case officer confirm that the distance between the rear dormer windows, subject of this planning application, and the neighbouring property to the rear remains above 21 metres, recommended back-to-back distance set out in the adopted residential design guide. Furthermore, the dormers and other changes proposed would have a similar relationship to neighbouring properties than was the case with the previously approved scheme. The changes do not therefore result in unacceptable levels of overlooking and or loss of privacy, or result in obtrusive appearance to neighbouring properties. Recommendation. So the officer's recommendation on the report you have is conditional permission. However, there is an update to that recommendation. There is concerns being raised recently that on the location plan, so I'm going to refer you to Appendix B, some of the land is not within the ownership of the applicant. Therefore, in view of that evidence, the recommendation will be updated to defer this application, minded to approve it, subject to the satisfactory service of the correct ownership certificates, because we're unsure that, they have not been served, so we would want, following legal advice, to ensure that the correct ownership certificates have been served to meet the legal requirements. That's my summary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peckley. I'd now like to invite Mr. and Mrs. Patel speaking in objection. They're already seated, and you'll start when you're ready.
We are opposed to this planning application on the ground that we have actually brought the title deed. His entire application was approved through deceit. He has lied to the council, showing my land as his, and showing he has more access, and he has a turning circle. In he owns, we've got papers with us that show he bought his plot from auction with 557 something square meters. And in his planning application, he shows 773 or something square meters. Out of that, a third of that land is mine. So surely his house doesn't meet the criteria for that house, as in of its size. And it doesn't have a turning circle. He has a huge car. At the moment, he lives there on his own with his wife and child. Yeah, it's a 6-bedroom house. Yeah, he's a property developer. Soon he will go on to sell it. And again, what will happen? A whole family will move in with many cars. Yeah, there's not adequate parking for many cars. There's not even a turning circle. They have to back out on my driveway or reverse in, either way. And at the end of my driveway is the exit gate for Burnham Grammar School. And at busy times, I'm sure you know what school is like, with children running and crossing and cars and mums and dads or whatever pulling up in the wrong place. So, compromising the visibility of people to cross safely. And then obviously you have the loss of privacy angle as well. And I believe that it doesn't comply with the NPPF directives either. Because at the whole row of houses along Hogfair Lane, in the section it is, are bungalows. Yeah, single-storey buildings with pitched roofs with additional loft conversion, what have you. Yeah, And again, directly behind 50A is another bungalow. Yeah. So how does a three-story building come up in between?
And
I have not seen that anywhere.
It's overshadow and overlooked property and impends upon my privacy. And he misleaded the planning department, and he deliberately hid the fact of that garage area doesn't own by him. He just got access only. And
hold on, quite sorry. And also, and I'd like to point out, in his plans, you see the size of the windows. They're not there. Can you see them? Can you tell me the angle, the pitch of the roof, Mr. Pegley?
What's the size?
What are the size of his windows on his plans?
If you can just make your statement.
Oh, but do you understand what I'm saying? He's deliberately being ambiguous so he can do as he likes. And Mr. Pegley said his officers came and visited the site. Yeah? They came, they saw Mr. Saran, who owns the plot, or Mrs. Saran, made it inaccessible, and his officers never actually carried out anything because they couldn't access it. And they signed it off.
We don't want any personal comments.
Okay, sorry, I do apologise. But my point is...
just planning issues. And
my point is that the house was signed off without them even carrying out a proper investigation.
Your 3 minutes is now over for your public speaking. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
Now, we now move on to members. Do you want any clarification or information on the points raised, members? Councillor Sandy?
First and foremost, the 4 letters that have come in today or whenever, shouldn't the members see those? Because do they impact upon what we're thinking about or the deferral? I don't know. But what I do think is that this application was approved on the basis of some amount of land, 770 metres, I think it was said to be. The thing is, I would ask is, if that was material in terms of the planning permission that you quote as already existing, being approved. You know, the fact is, 200 square metres short, and from what the gentleman said about parking, makes a huge difference to whether a 6-bedroom house would be there. So did we know about the land, and would it have made any difference at the time to that recommendation that planning permission be granted?
Ben, do you want to answer that one? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. So the issue here is that essentially from the sound of it, there's a land dispute. Normally, matters about land ownership, they're civil matters between the parties, and don't necessarily impact on whether or not the planning application itself is acceptable or not. This application, the type of application it is for a variation of the approved planned condition related to the previous permission. The red edge of that should stay the same because the permission itself always relates to the same red edge. I think what Adam Pegley has proposed is to defer the application to enable the correct process to take place such that any other owners of the land can be served. That's a procedural issue. So normally, as a council and as a planning authority, we wouldn't necessarily always know the exact land ownership of the site. That would be something that's reflected on the certificate submitted with the application form. However, if evidence is submitted to the council during the course of the application, we will look into it, and that's what's happened here. Is that the issue of land ownership has come up in the last few days, such that it's appropriate that we go back and speak to the applicant about that, and if necessary, they will need to resubmit the application form and serve notice on any owners of that land.
So what you're saying is the recommendation on page 52 is now changed.
Yes. Yes. So what we're saying is the application itself, in terms of the amendments to the dwelling, which are the main reasons for the application, is it's been built slightly differently to what was approved previously. So the dormer windows have changed slightly, and there's a slight change to the roof of the single-storey side element. That's what we're seeking consideration of in this committee, as to whether or not those changes are acceptable, and therefore, if the committee is minded to approve the scheme, in order to ensure that any permission has followed the correct procedures in terms of the application form and certificate that's been issued, that takes place before any decision is issued, so that the application is procedurally correct. But I will defer to my legal colleagues just to make sure that was correct.
So will that come back to the committee then?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Once we have carried out the necessary checks to ensure the notices have been served correctly, if that was all done properly, then if you've deferred it to issue, he will go ahead and do that.
But we haven't seen these letters that have come in today, have we, Mr. Chair? But I don't know if we can read them and make a decision instantaneously on them.
You could also defer it for it to come back.
I think that's the way forward. Councillor Bracken and then Councillor Broom.
Thank you. I'd just like to say thank you very much to the officers actually for trying to get through the detail of this. I did still though find it quite difficult to follow exactly what the situation on the ground is. So you put a picture up showing that is the situation now, but I'm reading words saying this is a retrospective planning permission. So that seems to imply that there is already something that is built that is in breach. So can I just clarify what exactly is the position?
I'm afraid you can't join in our debate, unfortunately. No, it's okay. No, we're not. We cannot take that at the meeting. But we're now discussing what we're going to do. So we've established we can defer the application and consider it at another meeting.
Your understanding is correct. So what you see on there is exactly as is on site. So the 4 issues subject to this application, namely those dormer windows have increased in height by 0.5 metres, as per 510 in my report. On that single-storey re-extension, it's a different roof shape. It's now a crown roof that you see there, whereas it had a mono pitch on the left. The roof lights, and then the fenestration, which is there was a window instead of a door in that single story, that is being applied for. Therefore, on site, it's technically in breach of planning control. However, only those 4 elements are.
If I could just follow up, so I have to say I have very great sympathy with the comment made by the parish council here that this sort of situation just should not arise. It may not be something we're allowed to take into account in our decision, but I find it astonishing that someone could accidentally build the wrong sized window, and as I say, we may not be able to take that factor into account. It's quite hard to ignore that.
Yep. Welcome to planning, councillor. It's amazing how people can actually build things that are not quite like the drawings. You'll come across retrospectives quite a lot. Yeah, go on.
So legally, it's not against the law to carry out works without planning permission. It would only become an offence if there was an enforcement notice issued and they didn't comply with it. So the legislation does allow for retrospective applications, and it does happen, as my colleague Mr. Pegley will no doubt tell you, is that people do build things and occasionally build them incorrectly, and therefore they have to come in for a further plan application to regularise what they've actually built. Otherwise, what they've actually built doesn't benefit from any permission. But what Mr. Paley is also saying is that in planning terms, he doesn't regard the changes that have been made or the differences from what was originally approved to be sufficiently harmful that we would have grounds to refuse the application.
So the advice from legal is then that we can defer this application because of this new information, and it can come back to committee.
Correct, yes. So it's for the committee to decide if he can either defer it and delegate the powers to determine the application to officers, or defer it for it to come back to a future meeting.
Not happy with deferring to officers, as you are well aware. Has anyone got any other comments? I've got Councillor Brum, Councillor Chocker, and then Councillor Wheelhouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I would, to one extent, echo what Councillor Bracken has said, that appreciation to the officers for putting this in as presentable a state as you can get it into, but I really don't feel that this is in a state that's acceptable for consideration at the committee. It's even with what you've tried to do, it is very unclear what is going on, and I don't think it's possible for us to make a decision on this. I don't think we should be asked to make a decision on something like this, frankly. Just as a point of clarification, did you not say that there is currently an enforcement notice against this property?
So when we originally came to the rear site, and as you see on that photograph was on site, we served an enforcement notice. Just to be clear, there isn't currently no enforcement notice in force because it's been quashed. They appealed the enforcement notice. During that appeal, they decided to remove that enlarged dormer window. Therefore, the inspector said, well, council, essentially your case of your enforcement notice is on that enlarged dormer window. That's now gone. Therefore, we're going to quash the enforcement notice.
I think I would just add that the situation from what would have been just a simple situation of a change on the approval in 2019, I think it was, and were minor amendments. Now we've got our whole legal situation put in today, which has now changed it completely, which is why I'm suggesting we refer and we get that sorted and come back and debate.
And can I just also say that I agree completely with you, Chair, that this matter should come back to the committee rather than being deferred to officers.
Yep. Councillor Chocker, you indicated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think the points have actually been covered by Councillor Brum. But I just want to get one thing. The reason it's going to come back to us, because I haven't got my head around this, is the fact that the Planning Commission was granted with sort of incorrect information. Is that what's going to be clarified over the next sort of few weeks, and then we will have the correct information and we can make a decision again?
Yeah. Ben.
Yeah, so what's happened is evidence has come to light that the correct ownership certificate hasn't been submitted with the application. So when you submit an application form for a plan application, there's a certificate on there which the applicant should indicate whether they are in ownership of the land, and if they're not in ownership or they don't own the land, they don't have to serve notice on any interested party. So what's come to light is that the ownership certificate that has been submitted doesn't necessarily do that, because it's suggested that there are other interested parties in the land which would need procedurally to be subject to a further certificate. Once that's done procedurally, they would have carried out the correct process for submitting a planning application.
Yep, okay. And I've got Councillor Wheelhouse.
Thank you. Really, I agree with everything that's been said. It seems to me that the planning application form may or may not have been completed correctly. Was the information accurate? Who owns the various parts of the site? And who owns how much? What's the area of the plot? Has a misrepresentation been made? And what do the new letters say? I think all to be revealed in the next episode.
I believe we ought to have the letters emailed to us or given copies now if you want to take them away. I don't think we haven't got time to read and digest them at this meeting, and we don't know the full facts.
All the letters, when they are submitted, they are uploaded to the website for people to read. So that's a normal way that you're able to.
Yeah, but we don't think when we're coming to a planning meeting that the website would have been updated on the day of the planning meeting. You know?
No, that's correct.
And you're assuming we haven't got lots of Teams meetings to sit watching before we come to planning. Right, now, Councillor Sandy.
I just want to ask a question of what is proper. We've been told that all the proper things were done. Would it be considered proper to put a 350 square metre property on a 570 square metre site with only parking space for 2 cars?
I think in terms of this application, all those issues were considered when the previous application was determined, and it was granted permission by the planning committee. As Mr. Pegley has mentioned, the main issue with this application was to consider the changes from that, which mainly related to the dormer windows and the roof of the single-storey elements.
Councillor Bunn.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just very quickly, Mr. Robinson, did you say that the original application came to and was approved by committee?
Yes. December 2019, I think. So we are where we are, but we do need now to see these letters, and the officers need to go away and do another report. So I'm sure we will all agree with deferring this application now to the new evidence that has come forward, and we will get the letters circulated. You won't need to sit and look them up on the website. So I think that covers his application as far as we can go at the moment.
A proposal still needs to be made for deferment. A proposal still
We
needs
have to have a vote, you're right. So I've made a proposition. Do I have a second?
No, I'll second that, yeah.
Right, all those in favour, please signify.
10 in favour, Chairman.
Pardon?
Unanimous. Sorry, 10 in favour, unanimous. Yep.
Yeah. Right, thank you, Claire. I wasn't concentrating. Because that is something that was a bombshell. Right, we have now come to the end of the meeting. I would say thank you very much for all your contributions. And I think a particular thank you to all our public speakers and the officers. And I hope the new members found it interesting. It was a bit of a challenging start for you. But there is one thing I would mention. We do have a lady that is asking for recorded votes at every meeting on planning committee. Because we used to do it when we had our virtual meetings, and everyone we called out everyone's name. Now, the latest I have on that is it's not in accordance with the Constitution, because the Constitution says a show of hands, but I am told in the latest email that I've seen is that they are now saying, and Claire will probably correct me if I'm right, that we can actually decide as a planning committee if we want to do it. Because some have already. It's not in accordance with the Constitution. If you want to go away and double check that, don't want an answer now, but if you can let me know before the next meeting, and if we do have that opportunity, I think it's only right that it goes to the committee next committee meeting for a vote of members.
Will they vote by a show of hands?
I don't know. I might do the counting. You never know.
Secret ballot.
But if you can actually find out.
All right. From what I understand, Chairman, it's show of hands, but I'll come back to you.
I've had another email today before I came here, and where it's down to the committee chair, but I will not comment on changes to the Constitution in relation to planning committees, Claire. That will be inappropriate in this forum. But if you can double check for me. Anyway, yes.
I also read that any member can request that his vote be recorded.
That is for a recorded vote. You can always request for a recorded vote. But the Constitution says on something like a planning committee and other committees, it is by a show of hands because it takes a lot of time. But I've had this latest email, so I would ask it to be checked. And if that is the case, then we ought to formally have a vote on it. That's all I'm saying for the next meeting, which is on the 10th of August at 2:30 p.m. Then we'll probably ensure that we have lots of applications. But there are lots of applications in the pipeline, and Ben will tell me how many more. What's the percentage increase in applications, Ben, at the moment in this area?
In Buckinghamshire, about 36%.
Yeah, increase over normal applications. So if we do get call-ins, which, if it's provided it's valid planning reasons, I would recommend, then I think we're going to have a busy year as a committee.
There's a risk of approval by non-determination as well.
Well,
too,
there
course,
is.
Yes,
I know.
Dither around. That's a balancing act.
Yep. Yeah. But anyway, thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this first meeting. It's certainly been trying, I think. It's been very complicated.